All right, so we're here at a school talking about a cell phone ban, and we've heard different versions of this over the years. And I know the state was studying it, but you've decided to kind of put it in fourth gear. Why in June, 6 months out from the legislative session, are we talking about this already?
Yeah, I don't need another study to know what needs to happen in our schools. You know, these devices just get in the way of learning. They get in the way of teachers being able to teach. And frankly, they get in the way of students interacting and having a positive environment in the schools. So I just really felt it's time to get out right now, early, and communicate to the legislators and the people of the state that we need to move forward with a cell phone ban in our schools.
I know we heard from a parent today, but parents are going to say, well, I'm used to being able to always text my kid, and I got to talk about pickup or drop off or lunch, or everyone's gotten used to these. Are you expecting to have to deal with some parents who may not like this idea and want that ability to talk to their students 24/7?
Sure, we'll be having a public conversation, obviously, and I think those are legitimate concerns, but I do think there's a reason why the overwhelming majority of parents across the country support a cell phone ban in the schools, because like me as a parent of teenagers, they know how distracting those devices can be to their kids. And so I think in balancing out, right, those issues, hey, I can't be in touch with my kid every single minute of the school day, versus, hey, my kid now is actually paying attention in class, has a good classroom environment, there's no cyberbullying going on in the classroom or in the schools. I think the advantages far outweigh those concerns.
You called it your top priority for the legislature.
Absolutely. Look, I just know from personal experience how challenging those devices are. And I speak from a place of, you know, I've got a wife who's very engaged with the kids. I'm pretty involved with the kids. My kids are pretty well adjusted, but I know how distracting those devices are in our home. You know, I can't imagine for teachers trying to navigate that in a school with a classroom full of a whole bunch of kids. I mean, give me a break. You heard at the press conference what a teacher here said is when they made the change, it allowed, he said, I can now teach, basically. He can do the job he's trained for, that he has passion for, that he's good at, that helps kids. We've got to get to that place in our state.
So that's the top priority, but there is a budget that has to be passed too, and we just saw this memo that was sent out. Can I ask you about that?
Of course.
What are you telling state agencies to do over the summer?
Pretty clear. The letter lays it out in stark terms that we're going to be facing a challenging budget session next year when the session convenes in January. And so we wanted to communicate early in the process so all of state agencies understand we're facing a serious budget situation, and they need to understand there's not going to be new programming going on, and they need to look at potential cuts to make sure we can balance our budget without raising taxes.
How do you explain to folks that we're here again, because this will be your third session, and we've talked about significant cuts in budgets and taxes, and why are we having this discussion again?
Well, a couple of reasons. Number one, when I became governor 16 months ago, I think it is now, you know, I inherited a $16 billion budget shortfall that basically came out of the clear blue sky. I ran for governor, as you know, Drew, for a year and a half, 2 years. No one ever asked me about a budget shortfall. There was not even a public conversation about having a budget shortfall. Then a week or two after I got elected, suddenly there's a headline saying we have a $16 billion shortfall, despite having a good economy. Look, that's not acceptable, but trying to right-size that ship is not so easy. You're not going to do that in one session or even two. But this is my first chance to propose a long-term budget, as you know, as governor. And that's why we want to communicate to all state agencies that part of what we need to do is right-size that budget with budget realities. And that's not going to be easy. We've already made billions of dollars in cuts in the past couple sessions, which doesn't get covered a lot out there in the media, but we've made billions of dollars in cuts to go with that revenue. And that hasn't gotten the job done. And so in my budget I'm proposing, really for the first time, a long-term budget, it's got to be one that balances out so we're not here in 2 years having this conversation about another budget shortfall.
Would that include a tax increase, a new tax, wealth tax?
I will absolutely not be proposing tax increases. And by the way, to your earlier question, I just will add, I took a look at why did we have a $16 billion shortfall? Why was that going on when our economy is good? And one thing that came out of that was, you know, we have experts who give us revenue projections, how much we think our revenue is going to grow as a state with the economy. So let's say they say it's going to be 3.1% revenue growth. We have a state law that has allowed the legislature over the past years to ignore that and assume 4.5% revenue growth, even if that's not based on anything. Well, guess what? For years and years and years before I was governor, they budgeted to 4.5%, even though that was not the revenue growth that the experts were saying was going to come in. Well, you don't need to be a rocket scientist to understand you're going to have a budget problem. That's why when I became governor, as you know, and over the objection of a lot of my friends on the Democratic side, I said I'm not signing a budget that assumes 4.5% revenue growth. Each budget has to be aligned with actual revenue, and that's what we've done each of the past 2 budgets I've signed. So we need to change the way we're doing our budgeting. We've started to do that, but we're still dealing with the impacts of that huge shortfall that I inherited a year and a half ago.
But no new taxes as part of the 27-29.
You will not be seeing that, no. Yeah.
The millionaire tax is there
Yeah.
already.
Yeah.
You know there are signatures being gathered as we speak.
Yeah.
Do you expect that to be on the ballot this
do.
November?
And I always have. I've been very clear about that. I think when I first announced my support for a millionaire's tax, I'm losing track of the time, a year ago, December, I guess it was, or last December, I guess it was, that I expected this to be a conversation with the people at the ballot box and a conversation by our state Supreme Court on its constitutionality. That's not a surprise to anybody. So the only question was, is it going to be on the ballot this year or next year? It looks like they're aiming for this year. So I've always said I welcome that conversation. I support our initiative process, always have. I'm a believer in it. And I think on big issues like this, the public should weigh in. You know, should we ask folks who make more than $1 million a year in income every single year to pay more so we can provide free breakfast and free lunch in every school like this all across our state? Right? And get rid of sales tax on common items, to provide a working families tax credit, a check to hundreds of thousands of working families across our state, to get rid of the business and occupancy tax for thousands and thousands of small businesses. They just won't pay it anymore. We're taking the revenue and putting it right back into the pocketbooks of small business owners and working families and support schools like this. So I think when folks see that and balance it out, they'll support it, but I'm glad it's going to be on the ballot.
Voters throw it out, that budget hole gets bigger. Are you concerned?
No, so that's important. So when we adopted our budget, right, that revenue's in the future.
But long
right?
term, I'm saying. I mean, that's
sure.
looked at as one of the solutions for our state's budget problems. And if they throw that out,
It certainly won't help. There's no 2 ways around that. But this is different than the wealth tax that was proposed a year ago that I was not wild about, because they assumed that revenue to pay for things immediately that session. And I said, wait a second, that gets kicked out in court. We have now blown a huge hole in our budget. So this is different, right? We're not assuming that revenue today. We're not assuming that revenue tomorrow. We're not assuming that revenue next year. So we'll have that process. Now that said, of course, right, I'll be very disappointed if we're not able to provide free breakfast and free lunch to every K through 12 kid in our state, of course, and not provide that tax break to small businesses. I'll be disappointed, but we'll manage to that. But that's not the immediate challenge we have with the shortfall and why we sent this letter to state agencies.
do you think voters will support it?
I do. I mean, it's, do I think this will be, an intense election? Of course. But that's the way our system is designed. I've never been afraid of elections. I've run a few myself. I think that's the way our system works. So I welcome that, and frankly look forward to having that conversation with the public about the benefits of this. And do we want to make our tax system more fair? I mean, the people have to decide. Look, for 99% of Washingtonians, they pay a higher percentage of their income in taxes than the wealthiest 1%. That's just a fact. That's just a fact. Do people think that's fair or not? Is that the most equitable way of doing our taxes or not? I think that should change. I think we should take those dollars and help out small business owners and help out working families. But that's a debate we're going to have, and I'm looking forward to it.
Last topic is one I think you're going to be more excited to talk about. Soccer.
I'm excited about challenges. I'm excited about challenges. I don't mind that. I think it's all good.
Well, in your line of work, you better, I guess. So we've got the World Cup.
Soccer, I'm excited about that.
Are you going to the matches? What will be your role? What will this be like for Western Washington?
Yeah, well, first, I mean, it's the biggest, as you know, it is literally the biggest sporting event in the world. Like, it just blows past the Super Bowl. And so I know for a lot of Americans, they may not quite appreciate that. There's a growing awareness of that. But the World Cup is massive. Number two, look, I think only 11 American cities are hosting a World Cup match. We're one of them. In fact, we get one of the matches of the United States national team, which is huge. They just have a few games in the opening round. So one thing I think is worth pointing out is they're not handing those out like candy to any city who wants them. The competition is intense. So the fact that Washington State is hosting this just says a lot, I think, about our state and how we're viewed on the world stage. For me personally, yes, I've got a good friend who is taking me. We've played soccer together for, I don't know, Sam and I played soccer together a lot of years. In fact, we play right here at Robert Eaglestaff at the fields here for, I think, 15 years. We played every Sunday morning. I've not been doing that for a little while with my day job, but I'm super excited to get to a couple of the matches, yeah.
I did want to ask about the gas tax. I know that's come up.
Yeah.
Would there be some kind of a holiday? It's going to go up another penny plus come July 1st. Yeah. Any more discussion to get rid of that?
For those Republican legislators who want that, what I would encourage them to do is reach out to the president of their party and ask them to stop this conflict in the Middle East, which is driving up our gas prices in Washington State by $1.50. That's nationwide as well. So, I mean, it's ironic, right? They're saying, hey, have a gas tax holiday. They can go to the person, the head of their party back in Washington, D.C., who is the reason why gas prices are what they are right now. So, honestly, don't have a whole lot of patience for those folks, right? There's something in action they can do. So until they send a letter to the president asking him to change those policies that are impacting gas prices, that's where they should focus.
I think there's some hope that you might look at that idea. That's not on the table.
And that's not what really governors are doing across the country, just to be clear. I mean, it's clear what's going on and why we have gas prices where they are. Look, it's the president. I don't point to D.C. for every problem. Lots of these things are nuanced. On this one, it's pretty clear. It's $1.50. Folks are paying extra because of that.
We were amongst the highest before the conflict in Iran. But
the increase that folks are seeing right now, that $1.50, that is because of what's going on in Washington, D.C. And if folks are concerned, especially my friends, Republican friends in the legislature who have opinions about this, look, until they call the president, until they write to the president, until they go back there and have that conversation, give me a break, yeah.
Thank you, Governor.
Hey, thanks, appreciate it.
I appreciate your time.
You bet, yep.